Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Herman Knives Vespertilio. First off, though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Polish Custom Knives, who is very closely related to Herman Knives. They appear to be the kind of main or sole distributor for them. But anyways, they sent this guy along to me as a review sample, and I appreciate that very, very much. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very, very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature and quality of my review, but there you go. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. This guy is a really kind of a weird size in a lot of ways. First off, let's compare against the normal ones for the channel, the Spyderco Delica and the Ontario Rat number 2. And what we see here is in terms of sharpened blade length, we are substantially bigger than both of those guys, even though the handle actually isn't all that large. And so there is that. And then here it is against the Spyderco PM2. And so we can see here, sharpened blade length is almost identical to PM2, but the handle is a great deal smaller. So there's that. And then I'd actually like to compare it against a pair of other knives from Herman Knives. Here it is against the Sting model. And so what we see here is that handle-wise, they're actually fairly similar. But in terms of blade length, they're actually pretty similar too, right? This looks like a much smaller knife than it actually is. If you just see it in on pictures, it's like, oh, a little tiny guy. But in reality, it's kind of up there. So I appreciate that. And then here it is against the Herman Knives Dragonfly. And it is uncontroversially rather smaller than the Dragonfly, right? The Dragonfly is a big, beefy boy here. And the Vespertilio feels absolutely lightweight next to it. So there is that. Then finally, a quick note on this. Well, actually, two quick notes. What the heck's a Herman Knives? Herman Knives is a guy, I believe Bartosz. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name. Bartosz Herman, based out of the Poland there. And very cool maker. And I've featured his stuff a couple of times now on the channel before, but very impressive stuff. And then this particular model here is a dressier model. This is an $800 knife as it's currently configured. The standard titanium base model, so to speak, is $616, which is oddly specific, but that is indeed the price point. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little knife here. So on the good side, to start with, I think this is a good size, certainly in terms of blade length here. If we measure this guy up, we're coming in just over 3 inches. In practice, just over 3 inches is a little frustrating if you've got laws that limit you to 3 inches, but I think it's a good size overall. It's going to give you enough blade for pretty much anything, but without going too crazy. It's not, you know, full-on Dragonfly style here. So I definitely do appreciate the size here. Next thing, right here in the middle, that is a Torx Screw. Herman Knives is a fan, generally speaking, of silly bit patterns. They'll always include the tool, but still, it's nice to see him actually just using freaking Torx for a change. It makes the disassembly so much easier and nicer, which actually, speaking of which, I should also mention, the disassembly of this was so much nicer than any of the previous Hermans. And it's little details that make it happen, but for instance, there are not screws under the clip, which means that you don't have to remove the clip to get rid of the screws, right? Which is good. And similarly, it was the easiest of the Herman disassemblies. That doesn't mean it's a straightforward knife to disassemble necessarily, but it definitely seems to be an area where they've been working on that a little bit. Speaking of the clip, I do like the clip here. The clip is relatively long. This is something that Herman generally does, is longer clips, but I don't see any downside to that. Especially with a smaller knife, it's nice to have that little bit of extra security, so that's good. Next thing, this is using some Damascus. Damascus is, of course, a titanium Damascus. This is where you mix 2 grades of titanium together, and then you, when you flame them, you get differential anodization patterns. Same thing here, and here you can actually really see the layering of that Damascus, well, that Damascus, I suppose, in the middle there, which is great. So I appreciate that very much. It's very well done, and you can see here it extends all the way through the backspace. That's a nice thing. So definitely a good touch. Next thing, the action on this is good. Oh, the action's good. Here, I'll hold my hand completely still, and oh yeah. Not only does it deploy well, but it sounds good. Oh, yeah. It's got a really nice crisp to 10. It's got a smooth close to it. It is really just a nice action. Big, big fan of that. So that's good. Next thing, this guy has a pretty unique look to it. This is not really shaped like every other knife. I've had a lot of knives on my table, and certainly, everything looks a little like everything else. But at the end of the day, this ends up feeling a lot more unique than a lot of the other stuff we see in the knife market, right? This little back part here, the strong reverse tanto, I think this ends up looking much more unique, much more interesting. It's kind of got a mix of batarang and parallelogram going here that I just say I appreciate. And it looks different, it looks unique, and especially compared to like the Sting, which although I like it a lot, it is a little on the more vanilla side. This definitely it's throwing down some series design vibes. So I appreciate that very, very much. And then finally on the good side, the details of this. This is something I always love from Herman Knives, but it's definitely 100% there. You can tell he is not only making his own pivot screws, but he's making his own pivot in the back. Oops, got the camera there. But making his own pivot in the back. And one of the things that's important about that pivot is that it is not free spinning. The pivot is actually, there were little tiny cutouts on the side there. By the way, that's a nice polish there, especially when I cleaned it off there. Yep. That's a good polish. Anyways, good polish too. But you can see the pivot is not free spinning, and it is, in fact, that mechanism is hidden within these milling lines, which are all over the knife itself, generally speaking. And the milling lines on the clip match the milling lines of the knife overall, as in same basic idea, dimensionality, etc., which is good. The screws on this guy, you can see the screws are coming through here, and they're going straight into the titanium on the other side. But if you're going to do that, polishing the ends of the screws into nice little balls, that's a nice detail. That's a good little touch there. Similarly, you can see the backspacer here is a chunk of Damascus, but it doesn't just kind of fall off at the end there, right? Instead, what you end up with is this little polished pointy portion. The polished pointy portion, the triple P. You can see it right there. Yeah, that's really nice. It's a little thing, but it really adds a level of excellence to it that I got to appreciate. So that's good. I appreciate on the Damascus itself, in the back here for the backspacer, that he's done the nice purple, but then on the inside, you get a very different look. You end up with a very much more orangey look. You can see it's the same material and whatnot. And this is probably just differences in the heat anodization, but still, it looks really nice. You get a flash of something different when you flip the knife over and look in, which is good. I like the logo on this guy very much. If nothing else, it's just beautifully done. It's very sharply engraved or lasered or etched. I don't even know how he's doing it, but whatever it is, it turns out really nicely. This is just really excellently done. The blade tang itself, you can see there's a little bit of a the top of the blade itself, the blade spine, has a little bit of a swedge thing going on there. Not a whole lot, but it's got something there. And then also, when the knife is closed, there's this little tiny part of the blade tang there, which looks like it should be sticking out, but instead is rounded off, and so that it matches exactly with the outside contour of the thing when closed. That's good. And then the internal milling, all of that kind of stuff, and as well as the fact that the inlay milling matches the overall milling of the knife itself. Like, oh yeah, the pattern continues into the Damascus. This is nice. This is just really, really nice. I'm a big fan of the details that you get here. So, to me at least, that's what's good, is that the details on this guy, as with other Herman knives, but particularly on this, are really well done. Just absolutely exceptional. It's got a very unique look to it. It's got a stellar action, well done Damascus. I like the clip very much. It's the easiest Herman disassembly ever, which ain't saying too much, but it is an improvement. It's got a Torx screw on the front of it, and it is a very nice size. To me, though, the great thing about this has got to be the blade. Blade, M390, solid steel, absolutely well done, good stuff. It has a super, super thin grind. This guy comes down to a deliciously thin edge there. I mean, if we look at the tip of this thing, oh, yes, this thing cuts like crazy. And with a near Warncliffe blade, it's not exactly straight across. There's just a little bit of almost a tanto-y thing mixed with the reverse tanto. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. But this blade is just great. Cutting things with this is a dream. I love, 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 love this freaking blade. And the grind is great. The plunge is very shallow. The sharpening choil is the length it needs to be. Yes. So to me, at least, all that is the great. The blade on this thing is just awesome for cutting, and the grind is very, very nice. On the bad side, it is pricey, 100%. I mean, given the amount of intricacy here, given the details, given the amount of time that Herman is clearly putting into these things, I'm not feeling like I'm getting my face ripped off, but $800 is a fair chunk of change. There's a lot of Damascus on this guy, again, but still, even the $600 base price is up there. That is very, very high, and you can get a lot of really nice production knives for that price. So, it is something to consider there, and that's going to take it off the table for a bunch of people. Next thing, one thing that's going to bug some people is going to be this little hole right here. This is where the stop pin needs to go when the knife is open, and you can see here there is a little hole there where, and it does make the bridge. It does connect all the way over, but that little hole is probably going to annoy some folks as you're looking at it there. Next thing, the flipper tab on this guy. Unfortunately, Herman has a tendency to make flipper tabs that are a little bit hooked, right, where the tip of it is swept back a little bit. That ends up making them just feel a little less comfortable in the hand than usual. And this is also a pocket peck and flipper tab. 100% going to be pecking on whatever's in your pocket all damn day long. So that's a thing. Next thing, this is not going to be a great choice for huge hands, not only because it is a relatively small knife, but because of the fact that much of the handle disappears in the back here. That means I end up getting a four-finger grip, but just kind of barely in the back here. And that's because I have smaller hands than most. Compare this to, for instance, the Sting, which is much less in this way. Here I get a really good four-finger grip on this guy, as opposed to the Vespertilio, which is definitely, because of this feature, going to be a little less grippy. So if you have a smaller hand, this is you're probably going to want to go Sting rather than Vespertilio. I'm sorry, if you've got larger hands, Sting rather than Vespertilio, or go to one of the biggies, right? The Dragonfly, yeah, everyone's getting a four-finger grip on that one. So that is something to keep in mind. Next thing, this does have a relatively shallow carry. If we look here, the top of the pocket clip comes up to about here. So that means this much of the knife is hanging up out of your pocket, and that is, in fact, a lot of screws. Which actually brings me to another point, although I understand, because the inlay, the liner lock inlay is right below the pocket clip here. But I kind of wish that they could get rid of some of those screws. Maybe screw the pocket clip in from the inside there. A blind clip would make this whole area just a little less screwy, so to speak. But this does definitely hang up out of the pocket, and it does poke at you a little bit with this top part as you are carrying it on a regular basis. And then finally on the bad side, and by the way, I should point out that any Damascus, not just here, but any Damascus is going to, over time, as you touch it, as the oils of your hand get in there, it will dull a little bit. After a while, it'll kind of reach a state of uniform dullness. See, still looks fine, but I'm trying to keep it extra clean for this review here. But anyways, one of the bad things about this guy is this little screw right here in the middle. That screw doesn't look so great. I really wish that was a blind screw coming up from the other side there, because this feels like a little bit of an eyesore in the middle of what is very attractive, and then there's a random screw there. So I definitely would have liked to have seen this inlay attached in a different way that didn't require a screw to be right there in the middle of it. So to me, that's what's bad, is that it's got the screw in the middle of the inlay. It's a relatively shallow carry with a bunch of screws sticking out your pocket there. It's not going to be great for huge hands, ergonomically speaking. The hooky flipper tab isn't ideal, and it's pocket packing a little bit. That lock pin cutout, or stop pin cutout window is going to be a little bugging for some people. Bugging? It's not even a thing. And it is a very pricey knife. Unfortunately, there is one ugly issue here, and it's very easily fixable, but it is ugly, and that is this back corner here. Anytime you use a flipper knife, you are going to press the knife into your hand. Back here, for instance. That is how the nature of the beast works. And as you can see here, when you do that on this knife, this back corner is just sharper than it needs to be. If we compare that, for instance, to the Dragonfly, you can see it's completely rounded off in the back there. Even if we compare it to the Sting, you can see that there's a lot more round over going on there. And I totally get that they're trying to maintain the angularity here. This is a decision that was, favoring the eye over the hand, but it definitely is not favoring the hand. And as a result, this little pokey corner in the back here definitely ends up not only hurting your hand just a little bit every time, not like cutting it open, but just being a little painful against your hand every time you flip it open. And also, as you are carrying it relatively shallowly, this will occasionally, depending on where you're carrying it, poke into your side a little bit as well. So this back corner just needs to be melted in some way that remains harmonious with the rest of it, but just turn this from being a really sharp angle in the back here to being something a little bit more rounded off. That would be a beautiful thing, and that is definitely an ugly issue, and something that I would really prefer to see fixed in future versions. So to me, that's the only ugly thing here, and that back corner is just a little too sharp. On the final conclusion front, this is a nice little knife. It's got a really good size, easy disassembly relative to other Hermans at least, a nice clip, good Damascus, great action, some awesome details, and a very nice blade. It is, of course, pricey, with a hooky and little bit pecky flipper tab, shallow carry. It's relatively poorly suited to larger hands. The inlay screw is not ideal, and that back corner could use to melt down a little bit. But on the whole, I do like the knife a lot. It's unique in its design. design. I think it's definitely attractive, and it's definitely off the beaten path. This thing looks fast while it's standing still, and I will give a whole lot of the bonus points, so to speak, for a unique look like that. And with a tweak to the back corner and possibly one fewer screw, I think this could be a very, very solid gem. As it is, it's right on the borderline. Without this, easily a gem. As it stands, I don't know. I think I should be, given that it's in service of the overall design here, the sharpness, I guess it's right on that edge there. That said, and for me at least, it's more or less tied, I think, in terms of my appreciation for it with the Sting, which is a little bit more of a conventional knife. But it doesn't have, I don't know, they're both really excellent. I think I like the Vespertilio a little bit more. And as it is, though, it's going to stick around for a while. It's got a really nice action, a really nice size, and an aesthetic that's a little bit batarang, let's be real here, that kind of uniquely talks to me, as well as a touch of serious fancy, which I do appreciate. So overall, this is really, really nice, and I continue to be very impressed with Herman knives, actually. The quality is really up there. It is quite good. Every time I've handed a Herman to somebody who's never there, like, wow, this is good. Why are we hearing about these folks more? And I know, right? It's up there with some of the higher-end makers, some of the highest-end makers, for that matter. But Herman is not a maker that's gotten caught up in the hype cycle. I say very, very dangerously, right? But as a result of that, you're getting a level of give-a-damn that is way above the price point. I feel like this is made with a level of detail that is much less common, even in other knives at this kind of a level there. And so, given that the knives are relatively regularly available, given only from Polish Custom Knives, but that seems to be the only supplier, and they ship pretty well, I am pretty impressed with this guy. And it doesn't have the, no availability, $15,000 trade value hellscape that pervades the world of, really super hype makers. So I'm a definite big fan of the Herman knives, generally speaking. So if you are looking for a knife that's got a very unique look, that's got some great details and an awesome blade, then I think it won't be long. Vespertilio, pick one of these guys up. Okay, I'm doing my best over here. Vespertilio is not straightforward to pun. Anyways, really nice knife, and yeah, right on that jeb edge. It may even be over. I don't know. Maybe it's good. If you like it, freaking buy the knife. You're going to love it. So anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.